Hello everyone, I'm Emily Matudan Halawig from the Department of College of Education at Caraga State University. Welcome to this video. Today I'm going to discuss about the philosophy of education, schools of thought, and now we're going to focus on the Reconstructionism and education. So what is Reconstructionism? Reconstructionism is a philosophical theory which holds the belief that societies should continually reform themselves to establish more perfect governments or social networks. It's also known as social reconstructionism, and this theory claims to be true successor of progressivism and declares that the chief purpose of education is to reconstruct society in order to meet the cultural crisis brought about by social, political, and economic problems. Reconstructionism is a philosophical movement that conceptualizes education as an institution. It is a primary objective for Reconstruct is to develop innovative curricula and pedagogical strategies to construct a new consciousness of collective international social cooperation for social engineering. It also asserts that educators must develop curricula and pedagogical techniques specifically to reconstruct society and educational practices from their current state. Next, we'll talk about the social reconstructionism philosophy. So it was stated that it is an ideology that centers on the idea of constant change and emphasizes addressing of social questions and a quest to create a better society and worldwide democracy. It is also a philosophical approach that challenges essentialism and other rigid and dogmatic point of view. Another philosophy of Reconstructionism is that it sharply contrasts with idealist theories, which Reconstructionists regard as a reflective theories that mirror inherited social patterns and values, and state basically about the two major premises of Reconstructionism, and those are: first, we have society is need of constant reconstruction or change. Then, second, such social change involves a reconstruction of education and the use of education in reconstructing society. According to the two philosophers, George Counts and Theodore Breumeld, as they exemplify this outlook more than anyone else, in which the Reconstructionism is not a philosophy in the traditional meaning of the term. That is, it does not seek to make detailed epistemological or logical studies, as also indicated that Reconstructionism is more concerned with the broad social and cultural fabric in which a human exists. One might say that Reconstructionism is almost a purely social philosophy. Its leading exponents are not so much professional philosophers as they are educational and social activists. They concentrate on social and cultural conditions and how these can be made more palatable for full human participation. So now let's discuss about the historical background of Reconstructionism. Reconstructionist ideas, in one form or another, have existed throughout history. Plato, in preparing his design for a future state, which is the Republic, was a Reconstructionist philosopher. He also outlined a plan for a just state in which education would become the building material for a new and better society. Plato believed that his state would be immensely desirable. He also proposed radical departures from the custom of his Greek contemporaries, such as sexual equality, communal child rearing, and the rule by a philosopher king. In his book, Laws, he envisioned a time when interest charges would be forbidden prophets would be limited, and human beings would live as friends. Stoic philosophers, particularly in their concern for a world state, promoted a Reconstructionist ideal. Or Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor and a philosopher, maintained that he was a citizen of the world, not of Rome. Many of the Christian philosophers, such as Augustine, preach Reconstructionist reforms to bring about an ideal Christian state. The kinds of reforms that Augustine asked for, his books, The City of God, were it intended for the human soul rather than the material being, but they had ramifications that carried over to the material world as well. Theodor Briemeld, a major 20th century Reconstructionist, stated that Augustine raised several difficult questions that later utopian philosophers endeavored to answer, such as whether history encourages people to believe that their ideal goals can be reached. So these are the Christian utopian writers, including Thomas More, Thomas Campanella, Johann Valentin Andre, and Samuel Gott. They are also proposed things we might do to bring the state into better accord with this Christian thinking. So now, let's move on to the Reconstructionism as a philosophy of education. Perhaps the most outstanding characteristic of Reconstructionist educators are their views that modern society is facing a grave crisis of survival, that the educator must become a social activist, and that the school occupies a strategic position in meeting the crisis and in providing a necessary foundation for action. Education and human crisis. In there, numerous educators call themselves as a Reconstructionists, where the Society for Educational Reconstruction was established in 1969 to further Reconstructionist ideals on a wider scale. It also has a policy statement released by the SER that set forth about the two basic objectives of Reconstructionism. First, we have the democratic control over the decisions that regulate human lives. Second, a peaceful world of community. SER members believe in assisting educators everywhere in presenting their deepest social concerns to their students with optimum effectiveness. They also encourage leaders to apply Reconstructionist values to experimental educational programs in schools and communities. Next, we have the rules of school. The schools are fulfilling a need that by virtue of their organized and specialized structure, they can do better than any other institution. Yet, schools have remained basically the same. It has also had the idea that society is being advanced by making education more relevant or accountable. It is only to say that it is being made more relevant to the need of the status quo or more accountable to vested interests as they currently exist. And to think that the changes recently undertaken to make school curricula more open or flexible also will result in necessary societal changes could be called wishful thinking. Such changes often do not succeed in altering the power structure as much as in maintaining or advancing it. One great need in education today is to view the schools in a much wider perspective. Such a movement cannot simply be a movement in life adjustment, relevancy, accountability, or basic education, because these only prolong ideas and institutions that are in need of change. And to be effective, this movement must be a more radical approach that seeks, through a variety of methods, to change existing social institutions, including the school, in ways that make them more responsive to human needs. Next, The belief that educators and schools are thus leading society in some better way, however, might be erroneous. Students and teachers are expected to live in a democratic culture. Students and teachers work together on determining what should be learned and how best to learn it. School is not as an institution that controls and directs youth or works to preserve and transmit the core culture, but as an institution that works with youth to improve society or help the students realize their individuality. So let's proceed. The aims of education. Goal of Reconstructionism in education is to eliminate any form of oppression within the educational system. Reconstructionism in education originated from social justice activism, which aimed to make our society a better place for marginalized people like women and minorities. Educational aims of Reconstructionism is that people act as change agents. They do not think that school is separated from society, and educators should be more involved in social cause. Reconstructionism emphasizes the need for change, and it is utopian in the idea of goals directed toward a world culture or civilization. Yet, it is also flexible because it holds that goals can be modified in process as problems and blocks occur along the way. Whatever the specific educational goals, one thing seems fairly certain to the Reconstructionists is that social change and social action are needed. So the purpose of education is that it encourages schools, teachers, and students to focus their studies and energies into a new and more pervasive social inequities, and as the name implies, reconstruct society into a new and more just social order. It is more focused on individual needs, contemporary relevance, and preparing students for a changing future. So here we go for the methods of education. Reconstructionists are critical of most methods currently used in all levels of schooling. And this is because the old methods reinforce traditional values and attitudes underlying the status quo. In such circumstances, that the teacher becomes an unwitting agent of entrenched values and ideas. The hidden curriculum underlies the educational process, and that the students are shaped to fit pre-existing models of living. To the extent that teachers are ignorant of this factor, they continue to nurture and sustain the system through the teaching techniques and processes they use. So say for example, school boards or states approve the textbooks that teachers must use in their classrooms, and teachers who accept and use these adapt materials without question become party to a diverse kind of indoctrination. Often such textbooks are approved because they are non-controversial or contain distortions such as subtle economic, racist, or sexist ideas popular in the dominant culture. Education should be directed toward arousing interests in public activism. For example, one political science professor allowed his class to spend a semester working for the candidates of their choice. These students learned more about the political process through active participation than they could have by reading sterile books or by attending lectures. Reconstructionists would heartily endorse this kind of approach for at least a portion of students' formal education. Next, we have the curriculum. The important thing is to get students to use what they learn, and traditional schools do not always encourage this. One way of organizing curriculum is to modify the core plan advocated by progressivists into what Brahmed calls the wheel curriculum. According to Brahmed, the core can be viewed as the hub of the wheel, the central theme of the school program, which the spokes represent related studies such as discussion groups, health experience, content and skill studies, and vocational studies. The hub and the spokes support each other, and the rim of the wheel serves in synthesizing and unifying capacity, although each school year would have its own wheel, and continuity would establish from year to year, with each wheel flowing into and strengthening the other. It has said that each year would be different. It also would inherit the problems and solutions from the previous years and would move on to new synthesis. Bremel thinks that the Reconstructionist curriculum is a centripetal and centrifugal force. It is centripetal because it draws the people of the community together in common studies, and centrifugal because it extends from the school into the wider community. Thus, it has the capacity to help bring about cultural transformation because of the dynamic relationship between school and society. Reconstructionists believe that the curriculum should emphasize truth, fellowship, and justice. They believe in incorporating world issues and stepping outside local community ideas. They are opposed to narrow or parochial curricula that deal only with local or community ideas and ideals. They favor studies in world history as well as explorations into the contemporary work of the United Nations and other world agencies. The curriculum should be action-oriented by engaging students in such projects as participating in worthy community causes, informing citizens about social problems, and using petitions and protests. Students can learn from books, but they also can learn from such activities as voter registration drives, consumer research, and anti-pollution campaigns in which they can make a genuine social contributions while they are learning. If we have the rule of the school, we have also the rule of teacher. An educator who is also a social activist. Teacher must seize education as a tool for solving the problems of society. The teacher can inform others about the nature and the extent of the problem. Teacher can suggest what one can do about these problems rather than being passive dispensers of knowledge. Teachers should become facilitators for analysis and change. The teacher provides authentic and holistic approach to learning. So, we are almost near at the end part of this discussion, and I hope you're still with me. So now, let's discuss about the critique of Reconstructionism in education. Reconstructionist analysis of social problems and the accompanying remedies suffer from shallowness and superficiality, often in the strong desire for change. Reconstructionists are precipitous in their recommendations to reform. Reconstructionists have a romantic notions of what schools can do. The views about democracy and decision-making are questionable. Reconstructionist philosophy has been an antidote to the easy virtues of materialism. traditional cultural values, and social stability. Its theory is not widely accepted, but it can stimulate and provoke critical thinking. It has provided visions for a more perfect world and suggested ways of obtaining them. Concern for social values, humane justice, human community, world peace, economic justice, equality of opportunity, freedom, and democracy are the significant goals for Reconstructionism.